welcome everybody to our second iteration of our podcast, Coffee with Cow. For those of you who don't know, Cow is our mascot at Learn International and flies all over the world talking to many different people and meeting different students. The purpose of the podcast is to really engage with lots of different stakeholders in the international education industry, both from student level up to faculty level, and also directors and senior management at administrative level in colleges and third-party providers and other stakeholders within the industry. And as such, I'd just like to welcome Professor Kevin Anthony from College of the Canyons, who's the chair of both the Hospitality Restaurant Management Department, as well as, I believe, the Real Estate Management Department, among many other hats, which I hope he'll be able to tell us about. And say thanks very much for joining us today and having a chat with us just about generally what's happening in international education at the moment and what the perspective is from community college, the perspective from within your position as a chair in the department, and the shift away from on-campus teaching, and really just to hear how COVID is affecting you in April 2020.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. This is great. I've been involved. I studied in Italy for a year, my third year of college. And so I was kind of hooked from the very beginning to, I saw the value of it. And it's been part of my life. That third year of college I had in Italy had the biggest impact on my future of any of my college experiences. And when I began working at College of the Canyons, we started, I actually took a group, my first group I took back to my college that I had, Loyola Rome Center, and Father Felice was there, and it was great to go back and see the director of the school. He remembered me and take my first group of students back, and I did that the following year. And then we got into a couple of years there that we didn't do much because we couldn't get program approval on some of our operations, but then we turned around and we got a grant with the Department of State, and we were able to scholarship about 75 students to go to Argentina, and then we also took another group to Costa Rica, and then after that we were able to get, I was able to put more trips together just almost on a yearly basis to Rome, Italy for a month. And I think the thing that was really strong with our approach is that we would couple up our classes. We would do my tourism class with an art history class in Rome. So, and we spent one summer in Florence. So we really, so I've really been a proponent of study abroad because it has been a great experience in my life, but I've also seen what it does for my students. It brings them out of a shell, basically. It brings them out of there. Our students, California, you know, we kind of have our own way of, we kind of get a little closed-minded, I think, when it comes to what the world is. And then when we get outside and we go to Argentina or we go to Italy, our students begin to broaden their perspectives. And so that's basically where I'm at with it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that. You know, I mean, you think about the relative benefits of study abroad in general, and that kind of increased intercultural capacity and global knowledge within the student body and those types of things. And, you know, to my mind, you know, when we as Learn International engage with a bunch of different levels of colleges at different tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, whatever it is, oftentimes there's different profile of students and those types of things. And I find that a lot of the time, those that really need this most are those that have the most barriers put in place of being able to study remotely, to have that international experience, you know, those that don't have passports and are, you know, high financial need, or, you know, first-gen students, those types of.
Yes, and I think you're absolutely right with that, because I've seen in our program, we've been able to actually bring a number of disadvantaged students that have barriers, and I've seen some amazing things happen. It opens up their life, and it is. And I would say this, you know, there's kind of I have a different with my colleagues at College of the Canyons, you know, I have a different connection with those faculty members that did study abroad. We've got a different life experience, and it's a different connection. And as well as my colleagues that have come from our international faculty, which we have a large number of international faculty members. So it's that broadening of the perspective and the experience, I think, yeah.
That's really interesting. And it's not something I had heard about before, but I would imagine it's something that's on every campus, is the natural draw that people have this international exposure on the faculty team would have towards each other. I mean, I even find it in my own life where there are things that really kind of spark your excitement and what it is to be you. And for me, definitely international travel is so important. But it's interesting to hear you say, you're more drawn to those faculty that have also studied abroad. And so
Right.
I wonder whether, is that your co-lead in the Italian program when he was teaching art, I believe, was it?
Yes.
Had he traveled many times before as well?
Yes. My co-lead, Professor McCaffrey, is he's from Scotland, and so he is, and he is. He's almost a mentor to me because he is so well versed in there's nothing more enjoyable than to go through one of his art history lectures in Rome and to walk through the Colosseum, and I feel like I'm still a student. I think that's one of the things is that when I go back and I take a group of students to Rome, I'm not just opening up them, but I continue to open myself up, and I see different opportunities, and I make friendships over there in Italy, and there's so much that you gain from an overseas experience. It's just hard to quantify it.
Well, tell me this then. Given that the experience is so much richer when the person is actually visiting the place physically, how do you think this is going to affect, let's say, for example, COVID-19 crisis pushes on into the end of 2020 and maybe starts in spring 2021, who knows at this stage? What are your thoughts on how College of the Canyons might be looking at trying to bring in some kind of international exposure to students in a time like that? Or is it just something where you batten down the hatches and we just have to plan for when airways open and we can go from there?
Well, I think that one of the things that's happened since I really began one of the first overseas programs, we now have a department which has a dean in charge of it, and they work more with China and Taiwan as far as, and they're basically working with bringing Chinese students to America and sending our faculty over there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't put a study abroad program in China yet. It's certainly in the offing. But I think the bottom line is that our culture at College of the Canyons is that we want to continue to expand and grow this our study abroad programs because of the benefit. We're seeing students. The best part, I see students that are disengaged and they decide to go to Europe, and they come back and they're more engaged, thoughtful. They have a different perspective, and it enhances their overall experience at College of the Canyons. And they go on from there. I had one of my students do the program, and he came back, and the next thing I heard, he was in the Peace Corps. So he'd gone to, but that was because of his experience in Rome. And
I find it very interesting. We reflect on a lot of our programs kind of on an annual basis, and we'll talk about, just anecdotally, the students that really stick out and you remember and those types of things, and the power of the study abroad and to be able to change somebody's life. And we have,
Yes.
part of the discussion to start this podcast was to start to tell the stories that are there. And that's what, when we have our student focused area of Coffee with Cow, and that's exactly what that's for, is to say, listen, I spent 10 days in Ireland, and I changed my major and decided to go back to China and be a cultural preservation ambassador, and those types. And that's a real life example. So really amazing. You have a student who's studying in Florida and has kind of made the jump from China and is doing a master's and is going to live his life in America.
Yes.
And then it was 2 weeks in Ireland, one in far northwest Ireland and the other in Dublin. And he said, well, what's happening in Ireland and the preservation of Irish culture and things, it echoes in my minority back in China. And I'm going to go back and try and put some things in place. So, I mean, that's just blows the mind, in terms of such a period of time. So it's great. But if I can we reel in the years a little bit and say, what was Kevin Anthony doing prior to joining College of the Canyons?
Oh, okay, great. Well, I was, it's kind of interesting. I was, my father bought a hotel, and he wasn't really a hotel guy, and I ended up running it for him. And so I ran it for him, and then he sold it, and I went into teaching. I taught at a high school, and I taught a hotel occupations job where I would put students into different positions at a Holiday Inn and teach them how to do those jobs. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I came back out, and I kind of got a little tired of education. I got back into running a hotel, and I did that for a while. And I started teaching at UCLA Extension, front office management. I did that as a part-time job. So I was always kind of I stayed in the teaching arena, but I always kind of worked in that area. And then when I left the hotel industry, I started my own business. And what I did was I would get federal grants to work with people that were laid off from employment, were receiving welfare. And what I would do is I would help them, I would get them into a partnership up with a Marriott or a Hyatt, and I would get them hired there, and I would help fund their training. And we did that for a number of years, and it was, Los Angeles, their job trainers, at that time, they wanted to, I developed a homeless job training program. So I worked with a lot of homeless, and I had some amazing experiences with that. I had, and if I could share those with you, I think, because I got to share this with you because I just talked to Joe about 2 weeks ago. One of my people that came in homeless came into our office without shoes on, and he was basically had a drug problem. He was a Vietnam era vet. He'd been a Marine, and he was not in the best of shape. But what we did is we took him into the program and got him a pair of shoes. And got him a job, and we had 4 residents, homeless residences, and we stuck him in this homeless residence, and Joe started to turn things around, and after a while we let him kind of be the supervisor of one of the residencies. These were small little 3-bedroom homes types of things, and then he got into construction, and he continued into construction. And I've kind of kept in touch with him over the years, and he called me last week and told me he just finished, he's a construction superintendent, and he just finished building a $63 million, 480-acre shopping center in Florida. So here you have a homeless person that is really didn't have a pair of shoes on when he came into the office, and now he is, he says he's going to finish it in July, and he is, but so that's what I find interesting about when you see somebody turn around, and that's what we do is, you understand that. That's why we do what we do, Chris. We turn people into, we give them opportunities to grow and expand. And so Joe went on to, great guy, and he just turned, a pair of shoes to be a construction superintendent. So
what an amazing story. I just, there's so many of those those kind
Yeah.
of untold stories, I suppose. Well, now it's told, which is great. But you know, that can serve as inspiration. I was only talking to a friend of mine who is in international education at the moment and is expecting a, you know, a Dear John letter is the wrong phrase, but is expecting not to be in international education imminently, and is really stressed about it because has underlying health issues and needs the insurance, you know, which is a whole other, you know, we can have a whole podcast series on that piece. But
Yeah.
and it was just talking about how it's important now more than ever that that little extra smile or that little kind of a wave or, you know, this tiny little thing can make a massive difference, because we don't know what other people are feeling, the stresses that they have behind closed doors. You know, people have their public persona, and, you know, I must appear to be at all times, you know, holding my stuff together, and so we just kind of talked about that. And I think while this is a very grandiose example of that, it's the you know, giving that person a chance and see what happened. And having that on a micro level is something that everybody can do on a day-to-day basis. Just a little smile. You never know what that means to the next person that you meet. And
Except,
yeah,
yeah, I would agree with that. But you know, it's interesting. I don't think I was very successful in working with the homeless in Los Angeles. I got a lot of them. I was teaching hotel management at UCLA, and that's what kind of segued into my program. Ran out of funding, so I moved into teaching at College of the Canyons. But my success with the homeless in Los Angeles, it was rooted in my experience traveling abroad, because I was, I had this mindset, you just go out and try it. Just go out and, you know, when I went to Rome the first time, I thought, what am I doing here, you know? But as soon as, you know, I tried it and I fell down and you know, the first day, and then after that, I just kept expanding myself. And when the city of Los Angeles came to me and said, you know, you're running this job training program, you want to try the homeless because nobody else wants to, why not? Try it. And that's one of the best things about international travel, is that you get this sense of wanting to try and do different things and relying on your abilities to succeed. And, you know, first you don't succeed, you fail. And, you know, I had, again, I had a number, I didn't expect to talk about the homeless, but I had a number of those homeless experiences where people like Joe went off and did amazing things because it was just, they had a program, they had a place to catch their breath and their feet and move forward, you know?
yeah, there are so many barriers in their way.
Sure.
It's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's so much more difficult for them to do something that we wouldn't even, you know, kind of think twice about. But that,
Yeah.
you know, it's such a positive viewpoint that you have. It's kind of infectious, Kevin, to be honest with you. So, like, how do you bring positivity into your life? How do you stay positive on a day-to-day basis yourself?
Well, you know, I think it's just life experiences. Every day's a good day. And that's a decision it's just I make my bed in the morning, and, you know, everything's going to fall together. There's rough things happen during the day, but, you know, every day is a good day. And I think that it was you know, as a teacher, if you're going to enjoy teaching, you have to be positive. And if you're not positive, it's not going to be any fun. And if you're positive, you know, my students are, I enjoy them, you know, because they keep, you know, it's infectious. You know, you grow, you get it, what you give to them, they give back to you, and in a lot of different ways. And I think that's why I ended up enjoying teaching so much, is that interconnection and being able to connect with my students on that level. And I wasn't getting that in the business world.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. I mean, myself and my wife, Cara, who's a co-director of Learn International, we talk a lot. And at some point in my life, I would like to do some teaching because, but for particular cohorts of students, I think, because I feel that the programs that we've built programs for, you know, serious top tier universities, and we've built
Right.
programs for community colleges and non-colleges altogether. And again, the different profile of student, but what I get out of it and what keeps me happy and positive is when I see a student who maybe is a little bit flippant about it at the start and thinks, I can't do this, not because I can't do it because I'm on the football team and I have to do this. I can't do it because I'm just not going to be able to get through an airport. I can't afford it. My parents are working three jobs, those types of things.
Yeah.
And then you see they go through this massive, it's a whole family coming together to send Dave off to London or Paris or South Africa or wherever it is. And they all go through the journey together. And I have seen it so many times where the positivity and the thankfulness of that individual when they land on the ground and realize that this international travel piece it's not rocket science. You just have to go and understand and believe in humanity. That if I get in trouble, people will help, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's as far as an investment, yes, it has tremendous. I've seen it too. I've seen that. I like the way you mentioned that the student that comes back when they come back on the plane and their family's there to meet them, and they've just all of a sudden, they've grown 2 steps. They just expanded, and I've been a part of that. I've made that possible.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to talk a little bit about COVID-19.
Yeah.
It's obviously something, the most prevalent piece of news over the last 4 months in the world.
Sure.
At College of the Canyons, how has it affected College of the Canyons, I presume, is it?
Well, I think that we were, College of the Canyons is about 30 miles north of Los Angeles. It's in its own valley, Santa Clarita Valley. Mm-hmm. And some resistance there because we didn't have any cases. But it was, but then the state came down and said, we got to cut this out. We've had some cases since then. And I was already geared for doing this. I had a feeling this was going to come about. It's been really hard, and what was hard for me in this whole experience was my son lives in New York, and he goes to Juilliard, which is a really good school. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's really, and he is, and I got a phone call from him, and he lives in New York with his wife, and he's, it said, well, Dad, I got a phone call today, said I graduated from Juilliard, we're not going to have a graduation ceremony. And then he got real serious. He said, but I'm really sick right now.
Oh.
And, it was really kind of scary at that point because I said, well, you got to go to he's like, the hospitals, I don't know what I've got. If I go to the hospital, I'm going to catch this thing. And I can't get tested. And, he had all the symptoms of it. And he's in really good shape. He's 36. He teaches CrossFit and all those things. But he was really sick. And for about a week there, it was kind of touch and go. There was nothing you can do with it. It's just you're powerless over this thing. And what's interesting about it is his wife didn't have any symptoms. But it took him 2 weeks, and he worked himself out of it, and he got himself he's okay, and he is self-isolating now. And the other thing that's problematic, this wouldn't normally be a problem, is my daughter is expecting in May, and she is, and she's expecting twins in May. Because and the hospital just called her yesterday and said, when you go in the hospital, your husband can be in the delivery room, but he can't, that's all he can't come back and visit you. So she's going to be in the hospital for a week. Mm-hmm. She's not going to have her husband there. And that's going to be, that's a challenge. One of the classes I've taught at College of the Canyons is it's a sanitation management class that we do for our kitchens on how we keep the food safe. And so for years, I've watched the federal government deal with the outbreak of a food illness, and watching the different layers and the conflicts and things. There was always this tsunami off the coast there that we didn't have the systems in places to deal with it. And unfortunately, that's what's come forward. And one of the things, and I'm going to bring this back to my experience of traveling abroad with my students, and then also my own experience as a student. You learn to adjust. I've learned to adjust. I'm here now for a month, and this is going to go on for several months. And my days are full. I'm busy. I'm teaching, of course, but then also my downtime where I'm not able to go out. We got things to do.
So I think that, a lot of it is to do with this positivity that you speak about, and looking at things, finding the positive within it,
Yeah.
And that's just something I think is important for people to remember.
Well, I think there's something too, Chris, as far as I've run my own business, you run your own business, and, to be successful at that and to have people succeed at that, that being positive, it's infectious, and it's something that we learn to do. Joe wasn't the only homeless person that came to work for me. I had other homeless people come to work for me, and they did very well, and it was just about getting them a pair of shoes.
Yeah, just make it happen. I think that's the thing about it. Tell me a little bit more about so this COVID-19. How is it affecting your students? Have they shifted across to this online delivery easily? Are they stressed about it? What's happening on the ground?
Well, I have a real advantage with my students because I teach hotel restaurant classes, and this is everything I teach is something they're going to use in their career.
Mm-hmm.
So they've already self-assessed themselves. This is what they want. So I've got a really good position in that every student that comes into my class wants to be there. It's not like I'm teaching a math class or a history class they have to take for a general education. So they self-select. And, really in 20 years, I've never really had a discipline problem. I get hospitality students, and they're really good natured to begin with. And as far as many of these students that I have now, I've had before. But what I'm able to do is, I'm able to connect with them over online, but I've been doing this for a long time. But what I do with my students is I use that word excellent a lot. That's an excellent paper you did. And I want them to begin to see excellence as a process. Sometimes they achieve it, sometimes they don't, but when it's excellent, I want that to be part of their daily diet. And because when they get out of their experience at COC, they've got to have a sense of their own excellence to really start their career and be successful. And so as far as what's happened with the online portion here, the Zoom, is it's enjoyable. They come, some of them I know they're still in bed when they're taking the class, and and some of them, they're you can hear, someone in the background once in a while, but it's fine. We're still, it's business as usual, really. It hasn't really been that much of a change. It's been fun, so far.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that, because I know, kind of anecdotally through the grapevine, there's, a number of faculty that we would have worked with, and they're finding it very difficult on the spur of the moment to shift their courses online, and the mediums
Yeah.
to teach, and, case studies and guest speakers, and, all of these different types of things that, maybe they've been teaching the same course for quite some time, and it runs really smoothly, and they update it as they need to, and then suddenly everything is all over the place. And so I feel,
Right.
Not having been a teacher myself, but, having spent a lot of time with teachers developing and building programs, I can understand, the stress that they're going through. Having said that, I think what it's going to do is to educate very quickly a lot of educators on the online education, I suppose, landscape, if you know what I mean. So do you see any of that happening in College of the Canyons or with yourself in your own courses, where, it's a forced innovation, but it's a necessary one, something that you've changed something up, or Any examples of
Well, well, actually, I was one of the very first faculty. I've been doing online for 20 years. I was one of the very first faculty to get started with it because, you know, a lot of my students were working in hospitality and they couldn't make a class because they had to work or their schedule got changed. And so I was always able to back them up by having them, okay, take an online class or you can take the class, and I could support them that way. So I think you've mentioned a good point there. I think the biggest thing that my colleagues are facing is that, you know, there's a little learning curve there as far as technology, but it's getting the students used to it and getting students ready to connect in this type of a format. And I think that, and the students get it, they take time. I think, so as far as transitioning, this was nothing for me. I've done this in the past, so it was just simply, I never thought I'd do my accounting class online, but that seems to have gone well too. You know, that's fine. But as far as what happens after COVID-19, it's, you know, it's anybody's guess at this point because I don't know how far this thing's going to go, you know, how long it's going to be here. When do we get a vaccine? When do we, I think hopefully we get some type of an antiviral that stops, you know, can help people with it. But I know that my son, he was really very sick, and this is nothing to be, you got to be really careful with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to hear that he's pulled through and he's out the other side of it now because obviously it seems that everything is, well, you know, the majority of major serious cases are weighted towards those with more senior years. But
Yeah.
you see all across the age spectrum examples and, you know,
Education abroad is going to continue to grow though. I just don't think that there's just too much value in it.
yes. What do you see along those lines? What would you see at College of the Canyons for, you know, in the next 5 years?
Well, I think the big thing is we have to, we've got our international students program, and we've talked with them, and they've made some serious commitments and to develop that program. Unfortunately, it's primarily with China, but I think the foundation is there. I think that it's we've done enough of the travel abroad programs. There's been enough comment. The students have spoken back about what their experiences have been. That it is it's one of those institutional goals that is it's got a good foundation. And when we get this thing sorted out with this illness, I think that it's going to pick up. I think that's going to pick up right where it stopped. You know.
Yeah. I think a concern that I would have personally is the market confidence in terms of that decision-making unit, the family or guardians or whoever is going into the decision, be it financially or just, you know, in terms of emotional support or those types of things, and whether they're together as a unit deciding, okay, well, let's just leave it till next semester or next year or something like that until because I don't think all of, you know, we'll click our fingers and across the world, you know, even if we do find a vaccine, it's going to roll out differently in different places and those types of things. So my concern is that gray area. And I think that is, you know, we're in the thick of it now and everybody understands that, but it's the tail at the end and how long that is, that's going to be the problem, I think. But look, yeah. We do know that we are going to come out the other end of it. And
yes.
And I like to see, again, there's that positivity, Kevin, in terms of the engine's going to start again, and that's great. So just a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
What do you think is the secret of a successful career?
Oh, that's a great question. And I have to tell you, that was just asked to me a little bit ago. I was on a hiring committee at COC, and one of the applicants asked that question. She said, how are you successful here at College of the Canyons? And she asked our dean, there's about 7 or 8 of us in the room doing this interview, and she asked the dean, and he just turned right to me. He says, well, Kevin's going to answer that for you. Yeah. And so it was really a gift, because at that moment I had to think, you know, what is the key? And the key is learning. And I said, you know, our culture at College of the Canyons is that if you want to get forward, is that you're a learner. You continue to learn, whether you're a faculty member, whether you're whatever position you have. And as long as you have that interest of growing and learning something new, I think that's the real key. And that's what I teach my students is basically, I want to see that you are, that you take your employment and it's an investment of your time and you're growing that experience and you're learning from that. And just off of that note, last week on Zoom, I conducted a class on customer service for our frontline employees. They had 42 people attended, and we talked about, how do you make your customer service stronger? What are the keys to that? And it was great. But that's what we do. And I think that's what we do at College of the Canyons. And if you can, and this all ties into, education. And for me specifically, my experiences traveling abroad is that, you learn, you grow, you take each one of those days and you make it what did you learn from it? And how did you grow from it? And I learned this the hard way, but that's really the key to, I think, to career development. And you have to have a sense of your own excellence. And that's why I keep, with my students, it's always, you're excellent. That's a great job. And when it is, I don't just throw it out there, but it's like a word they've never heard before.
Yeah, building up your own self-confidence to know that
yes,
everybody in the world is just a person, and you need to envisage your own, manifest your own destiny, so to speak, for want of a better phrase, and you can be just as excellent as somebody else. I love the fact that you're talking about the success of a career is actually just this constant state of learning. I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
One is, we know that you are involved, director, I'm not sure, of the Institute of Ethics and Law and Public Policy. And
correct.
I was researching for this, and I saw that there was a conference in 2017 that was videoed on YouTube. And part of the theme was, what makes America great? And
yes.
So what makes America great?
Yes, that was one of our, what my Institute of Ethics, we got a number of, we have a number of faculty have joined me, and we put on a number of, we've talked about the common good, what makes America great. And we basically, it was to put it in front of the students. And what my comment was, and I felt, and I feel that today, is that, we have our Constitution of the United States, and it's a set of, it's a document. What makes us great is when we really believe and we act personally on those guidelines that is put forward in the Constitution. And so for me, that's what makes us great, is when we follow, we not just follow that Constitution, we take it to heart and we live our lives with that, with those principles that are in there, because, all people are created equal. And, we say that, but do we really believe that? Can we act in that fashion? Can we act with, a person comes in your office without shoes on, and so that was what, that was my personal opinion as to what makes America great. And it is, and we've lost our way right now. I think a lot of the country has lost its way. So I'm really very, that's very close to what I do with what I think makes us great.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that all people are created equal, and I firmly believe that as well. It reminds me, though, of how things manifest in different countries, but there's this common humanity among people. And
yes,
I have so many different stories, but there's one that I tell every now and then, and it was when I was in Paris for a week, and I was visiting various different schools, and my father flew over on the Friday afternoon, and we were doing one last meeting in someplace in Paris, I can't remember, and we were strolling along, and it was a 9 o'clock meeting, and so we were strolling around about 8:30, and we passed a park bench. And there was a homeless guy sleeping there, and all of his stuff was neatly around. And when we came back, we finished our meeting, we were coming back, and at that stage he was up, and he had packed everything away, and it was perfectly put underneath. And this was his place, you know, and he took pride in it. He took, you know, he was excellent in his situation there. And
Right.
I remember that there was this really well-clad gentleman that walked past, and he was going to have a cigarette, and he took a cigarette out and he couldn't find his matches or lighter or whatever, and he went over and asked the homeless man for a light, and sat down. And the homeless man was having, you know, as only they can in France, he was having his little cafe in the morning and croissant and those types of things. And they sat and chatted, and we were quite a bit away, so I got to see this for a while as we were approaching them. And I remember thinking, wow, and feeling a little bit ashamed that I wasn't sure that the same interaction would happen in Ireland, and that the class system was just not there in that moment. There was this two people just chatting to each other in the morning. How are you? You know, I don't know what they were talking about, but they were in you know, in the middle of a good conversation by the time we passed them. And I remember thinking, you know, all people are created equal, and that is just a wonderful example of that.
Right.
And you know, oftentimes when in America, there could be a preconceived notion of that cultural kind of sandpaper effect that happens between American culture and French culture. And I've spent a lot of time in France, and I've spent a lot of time in America, and it's just a misunderstanding. They're actually much closer than they think.
Yes.
You know, and so it always gets me. I'm thinking, you know, but there's time and a place, I suppose, to have those arguments.
I've been to France plenty of times, many times over the years. I've always had I've always been well treated. I've never had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't say that about my experiences in America, but you know, the people have always been gracious, and I've always had that. And actually, my fiance is French, so she's Claudine is a French citizen, so she's American, but she's still a French citizen. So I know they're French. What's that?
You're fluent now in French, I'm assuming.
No, not yet. They give me a bad time because I haven't picked it up yet. So.
Well, you just have to do a trip to France.
Yeah, there you go. But, I'm going to leave you with one story though, Chris, because it's kind of a fun story. It has to do with hospitality and everything, and it's one of my favorite stories. I always tell it to my students.
Mm-hmm.
I was running my hotel. I had a gentleman that used to stay with me, and you probably have heard of him. His name was Andre the Giant.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the big wrestler. He used to stay at my hotel. And whenever I had a problem with a guest at the hotel, I would call Andre and say, Andre, could you come over to the office here and talk to this person for me? And if you can imagine 7'5", 540 pounds walking into the lobby to resolve a customer complaint. And he had the biggest smile in the world.
And me too.
Everything.
That problem
Just
solved.
It's problem solved. Everybody was okay. That's all right. Let it go. So
Funny. I mean,
this is great talking to you. You know, we should do this again.
Thank you, Kevin Anthony from College of Canyons. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. You know, wishing your family all the best, and also we'll check in again shortly. To the listeners, thanks so much for sticking with us. I hope that you got something from this, and I know I certainly did. And I love to hear you know, the anecdotes and everybody's thoughts on different situations that are happening at the moment and what's happening in the future. So I wish you all the best until then. Stay safe, stay home, and be kind.